Howdy, folks. Happy Wednesday. We are here to discuss some of the games from last night, some of the news in the NHL. Russ, you have some pre-show stuff? Start us off.
So, first one to start off with, as I'm driving around today, I hear a report about the Philadelphia Eagles that Carson Wentz has a strained back and really isn't going to play this week, and then after that, they'll determine what's going to happen with him. So here's the thing. You watched the game last week, and I did watch that game. He definitely got banged around. He's been getting banged around for weeks because the offensive line isn't good.
Right.
I saw him wincing at one point. So clearly, right now he's got back spasms. He's got a bad back. They don't want it to get worse. They know they're playing the Rams. Even if Carson Wentz goes in there, odds are he will lose to the Rams. So Nick Foles is healthy, so they're going to throw Nick Foles in. But the problem is, by doing all of this, like sports talk radio right now in Philly is toxic.
Right.
It's toxic because of this situation. And then the secondary one is the Phillies situation where they all want Bryce Harper. Every Phillies fan wants Bryce Harper, but they signed Andrew McCutchen. So everybody now today is like, we're fine with Andrew McCutchen if we get Bryce Harper.
Yeah, it's toxic on three levels because I'm sure buried is third is the Flyers when
the Flyers are buried fourth. The Sixers are the next one, which things are going pretty well with them. And actually, probably on a general day, the Sixers are ahead of the Phillies. But the Sixers is going okay, except Jimmy Butler's hurt, so it's not that bad. But the guy who I do the Stick to Hockey podcast with, Jason, I'm listening to his show, and they are getting bombarded by what we would call idiotic phone calls about, well, this is fine. Nick Foles is better than Carson Wentz anyhow. Like, this has all been held at bay this year with Wentz playing. Now that Wentz is injured and Foles gets back in, because remember, Foles started the first couple games. He didn't light the world on fire.
Peter, I have to say this as someone, because Russ just mentioned this, and as someone who made his notoriety calling in post-game shows in Toronto and turning that into a career. I listen to sports talk radio now, and I hear the callers, and I wonder whether their IQ is over 6. Because seriously, it's just this drivel of just uneducated critique. And it just destroys some of these shows. Now, some of them have good callers and some of them are insightful, but the majority of them is like, you got the knuckle dragging Neanderthals after the Bills game calling up and saying, why didn't they put in this guy for that guy? I mean, that's the commonality.
You know what I find sports talk radio to be now? It's all the people who never learned how to use a computer and social media and don't own a smartphone. It's like that is your generation gap, right? It's the ones who can't even do that, because all those people, they're on Twitter, they're in the forums on websites and stuff, right? It's the people, it's the old guys. So there was a person one year who decided they would record every Jets post-game show just for the commentary. And there were people who had
future Mike Ogello.
No,
there were people who had, like, on the show, I mean, things, and I know who they are. They're all from an area in Winnipeg called St. James. A lot of older families, older neighborhood, and it's the old, you got to get a guy who can skate and shoot the puck. Like, I mean, they all want to be Howie Meeker, and it's crazy. And you know what? It's solid entertainment. If you're not emotionally invested in trying to have an intelligent conversation, it's amazing entertainment.
Well, I was laughing. It's true. Like me, I'm just laughing because none of these are my teams. It doesn't affect me in the least. And so I was literally laughing. But because of these situations, this goes back to sports talk radio when it first came out in 1986, late 86, but in 87, in New York, if you were listening to WFAN, 75% of the calls were about Darryl Strawberry.
Right. And the funny thing is, one of the current hosts on WFAN used to be a caller, Joe. Right. I've listened to FAN for a long time, so like there are serial callers like Doris and Rego Park.
Yeah, Doris is long departed.
right, and Alan White Plains and a few other guys who have tried. But the thing is that those callers brought something, and honestly, there are some that are good, and there are some that have good points, and they are able to communicate it. But a lot of them is like, I hate Matt Sundin, and I think they should trade him for a bag of pucks. I'm like, okay, it's like, come on, have a better take than that. So anyway, I think it's devolved into that. And I think it's lost its entertainment value, at least for me. So I have a certain standard, and I guess they have to live up to mine.
No, and that's fair. And I think most of the time it's actually pretty good in this town. But it only takes a couple of things to happen. Like Peter could attest to it. If let's just say in Vancouver, if they made a trade today and the fan base wasn't thrilled with it, Sports Talk Radio for the next 2 weeks is just going to harp on that trade. Like that's just the way it's going to be.
I mean, there's certain markets that are really good for it too. And I think a lot of Sports Talk Radio has to do with sort of when your opportunity to talk to the host is, the host personality and what they can stick handle around. They've got to be able to take lumps of coal and make diamonds out of it sometimes, and keep it on contact. Not all guys can do it. Sometimes it's just like a gripe line. Okay. Like, could you imagine? I can't even imagine what was being said on sports radio in Philadelphia after the 7-1 beatdown the Flyers got. I mean, that's a gripe line thing. But if you're on your afternoon shows, your prime times, your mornings and stuff, you should be able to manage the content and stuff to have some good content.
Caller driven. See, like I don't want to
exactly. You can't be caller driven. You got to be host driven.
Right. They're not in this town.
Uh-oh. Yeah, but and this is and then we'll get off of this and talk about hockey. But this is the tendency that I've known that I've seen recently in Sports Talk Radio that I can't stand. Now I just critiqued the quality of the caller. That's me. As somebody who is a reporter, as somebody who used to be a caller, I have a unique point of view. But you have people, especially in there's one guy in Buffalo in particular, that people call up, and this guy talks down to them, insults them, and hangs up on them early if he doesn't agree with their point or if he doesn't think that they're intelligent enough. This is a guy who used to host the show and used to say, it's sports talk for smart people.
But that's cult of personality, right? Remember the movie Natural Born Killers when everyone's lining up to get murdered by them because they were celebrities? You're just calling up to get shot down because you're going to crack up. Your friends are going to crack up listening to you get shot down, and then you'll have your 15 minutes.
There's some of that with Mike Francesa. There's a lot of that. People think that. And they go online with it, and they just try and aggravate them on purpose. And
some guys from the Stern Show call up Francesa just to piss him off. So yeah. All right, let's get started here. Hello, Hockey World. Today is Wednesday, December 12th, 2018.
I'm Peter Tessier in balmy Winnipeg.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology. It's going into the 50s here.
And I'm Mike in Buffalo. And I'm Mike Agello. This is the Hockey Buzzcast here on HockeyBuzz.com. Okay, let's talk about some games last night. I believe there were, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 games in the NHL last night. Woo! We'll start with the one I was watching, and we won't go too long on it. But the Leafs, as opposed to what they did a few weeks ago when they went into Raleigh to play the Hurricanes, where the Hurricanes registered an NHL record 29 shots in the first period against the Leafs en route to a 5-2 victory. The Leafs had a much better first period in Raleigh, got a lead. Carolina tied it up. Leafs get the lead back right away and go on to win 4-1 over the Hurricanes. And two things about this one. We sort of talked about it briefly, Russ, last night. Yeah. You look at the Hurricanes, you look at the depth chart of that team. You look at, there is definitely quality there, especially on the blue line, especially on the right side of the blue line. But after trading Elias Lindholm in the deal to get Dougie Hamilton, who had possibly his worst game of his career last night, -4, putting the game-winning goal into his own net, trading Lindholm in that, and Lindholm was doing really well in Calgary, and then trading Skinner, who at one point was leading the NHL in goals, for a team that can't score. Thomas Dundon did his tour of Toronto radio and was talking all these positive things about the Hurricanes yesterday. Well, there's one negative about the team. Your team can't score. And honestly, I think that's going to prevent that team, amongst other things, from making the play.
It's two things. They can't score and they can't stop the puck on most nights either. The interesting thing for that team is, and you and I were sort of offline discussing last year, so I just looked up last year. If they want to equal the 83 points they had last year, they actually need to average a point every game now. So like 53 points is what they need. 53 games is what's left. This is just to not make the playoffs and do what you did last year. So
go 500 basically.
Yeah. So for all intents and purposes, they are worse than last year. Now, sometimes you take a step back to take 2 steps forward. I don't know if this is the case with this team, because there's a guy, Doug Abrams, on Twitter, who's a very big Canes fan.
I like Doug, actually.
Yeah. He pointed something out to me that I was unaware of, because unless you're micro watching a team, you don't get it. He was saying something like Jordan Stahl, before this injury, was like either 0 for 50-something on the power play, goals-wise, or 1 for 50-something, and they've not moved him off of there. And so you do wonder, when you see things like that, why? Is it because he performs some other function? I mean, maybe.
Well, but I don't know if it was Doug or somebody else, but somebody was pointing out that Philip Di-Giuseppe was on their first power play, and I'm like, okay, that's excusable.
Yeah. He could do some things, but
you know what? What's really funny about the Canes is that there's this impression that they've got goaltending troubles. They're not allowing many goals. They've only allowed 81 goals against. They just can't score.
No, but they don't stop them when they need to stop them either. There's that.
Right, but the net thing, Russ, is they've allowed 81. They've only scored 72.
Yeah.
They've scored the least amount of goals in the – oh, no, Kings are 71.
Okay.
The second least amount of goals.
But again,
at some point, and remember, let's not forget, they got rid of Skinner.
Right. Yeah. But all right, so let's take all that away and we go back to the other part of the Hurricanes, whereas Don Waddell set this roster with Tom Dundon this year. Where would they be if the Leafs didn't cut Curtis McElhinney?
Right. Yeah. He's leading the team in wins with 7.
Yeah. I mean, this is the guy who got cut and waived.
I think he's the only one who's got, of the 3 goaltenders that they've used, who's got a save percentage over 900, and he's hurt right now. And Mrazek was not great yesterday. No.
I mean, if you're the Canes, I mean, this is what I don't understand about this team is underlying metrics. They're the analytics dream team. They just can't seem to score.
And Charlotte's a good team too. Their AHL team is good.
Yeah. So what I don't understand is they have a plethora of assets. Why can't they make moves to improve the team with the most glaring point of weakness? What is holding them back? And the only thing that I keep coming back to is Tom Dundon and budget.
Well, and this is the thing. This is the thing, Peter. I had a little bit of an exchange going back and forth yesterday on Twitter with Ian Tulloch, who's works for the Athletic, and we're looking at the Canes, and basically I look at that team and look at the depth on defense, and we know how valuable defense is right now, and obviously I've been fixated on Toronto improving their blue line, and you look at the top 6 that they have. I mean, their bottom pairing is Calvin DeHaan, who they signed as a UFA, and Trevor Van Riemsdyk, and they have Jake Bean in Charlotte, Hayden Fleury in Charlotte, and Adam Fox, who I want to talk to you about in a sec, Russ. Yeah. In reserve in the organization, and I'm like, okay, you need scoring. You have a position of strength. You could very easily trade a Falk or a Pesce or and improve your forwards. And why don't you do that now? I'd have to say it is that budgetary concern because, maybe they think that they can draft players and call up Martin Necas, in the second half.
And Necas is doing great. I mean, we do talk about Charlotte with Patrick Williams on Sirius XM this weekend on Hockey Prospect Radio. We brought them up, and that's another reason I feel good about talking about the Canes right now. But right now, if you look at their home attendance, it's 67.8% after 15 games.
Yeah. Now with Fox,
Adam Fox, you wanted to know?
Well, okay, he's got 20 points in I think it's 11 games with Harvard right now. He's a junior, so he could declare and after his junior year and say I'm turning pro, and then I believe it's an August 15th situation where if they don't sign him before then, he becomes a Will Butcher, Jimmy Vesey situation.
Right.
I'm telling you right now, with the depth that they have on the blue line. Do you think Adam Fox is going to say, okay, first of all, is he going to turn pro this year? Maybe, maybe not. It depends on opportunity. If he waits until after he's done in his senior year at Harvard, I think the same thing same thing happens. But he's behind 8 defensemen. He's probably going to go in and probably play in Charlotte the first year or two. There are teams in the NHL where Adam Fox steps right into the lineup.
Yeah, they're going to have to guarantee that he steps into the lineup. I'm sure of that. And where that means or what does that mean, who knows, because we don't know what the roster will be in the future.
Right.
But I don't think he knows either, because I've spoken to a lot of people about it, and just the same way Jimmy Vesey was really unsure until the very end, so was Adam Fox. So it was nice that Carolina traded for him. It's a dice roll whether he actually plays for them or not, because he's going to have his choice of the league.
Right. And he can wait until this summer and declare, or he can wait until he's a senior, finishes out his senior year, and then it's automatic. So
he's got the hammer.
He's got the hammer. And the thing is, there are teams out there, not just Toronto, but Toronto, I'm sure, would be interested. And I'm sure Kyle Dubas would use the prospect of, hey, you could play with Austin Matthews and you could play with Mitch Marner, and he would be on an entry-level deal. The fact that he would be on an ELC for 2 years or 2 or 3, and with bonuses, I mean, he could step right in with some team and make a lot of money right away. So I mean, that's gonna be something we'll have to follow. The only note on Toronto I wanted to mention was William Nylander gets 2 assists in his 3rd game. Looked much more up to speed than he had in the first 2 games. Maybe the criticism will decrease a little bit about Nylander, but I still think. When it comes to the outlook for the deadline, and Kevin McGran brought this up in a piece in the Toronto Star, and this is something that Dubas has to think about. Eck mentioned Matthews and offer sheets. We know that's if it does happen, they'll match. If it does happen with Mitch Marner, they will match. Where the concern is, I think, guys who are RFAs like Kasperi Kapanen and Andreas Janssen, who are having good years right now, and a team that recognizes the fact that Toronto will be in a pinch in terms of the salary cap, could offer these guys, say $4 million a year, and the Leafs might not match. Now, Elliot Friedman talked about this in his 31 Thoughts today, and he basically said, let's see here. One GM said, who wants to be on the receiving end of Toronto's revenge if they decide, if you offer sheet them? And the thing is, they're made of money. They can do that. So that's why offer sheet situations in this league, it's all pie in the sky. It's great in theory. There's a reason why they're not big. Anyway, all right. Bruins play the Coyotes yesterday. Arizona takes a 2-0 lead. Bruins come back, score 2 goals in 33 seconds in a 4-3 win over Arizona. Russ, the thing we heard yesterday that we both thought was entertaining was that Arizona is going to use a 3-man rotation of Calvin Pickard, Darcy Kemper, and Aiden Hill to fill the goaltending situation with the potential season-ending injury to Antti Ranta. To me, that says one thing. The price of goaltending is too high out there, and John Chaika doesn't want to waste assets to plug the goalies.
Right. So they have no chance of making the playoffs this year. That's what it boils down to.
Yeah.
Like 0 chance. Like their chance went out the window with that injury. And so now they're just going to use what they got, and they will once again you could rewind. We've done this show for 3 years, and for every one of these 3 years, Arizona's in the same spot every year. So they're in the same spot this year again.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's the state of goaltending. at least in terms of depth, at an all-time low in the NHL?
Yeah, I think so.
I think that's an argument that could be made, or at least a discussion point. Because if you can even have a quality backup right now, you're in like the top 10% of the league. That's how bad it is.
Yeah.
And, that would explain the goalie market.
Teams can't hold on to a quality backup anymore, like Cam Talbot with the Rangers, like Grubauer.
Exactly.
You can't hold on.
Remember when Halak was at his peak, he still only got a second-round pick. I mean, the position's voodoo, yet here we are, and now there's none available. It's bizarre. I mean, it's such a strange scenario.
And the funny thing was, like, the list of priorities in terms of what I think Toronto will be looking for before the deadline, obviously defensemen, and then some sandpaper. But I was making the point yesterday in my column that some depth at goaltending is necessary right now. They're with the Marlies, they have Eamon McAdam and Kazimir Kaskasuo. They need a third goaltender with NHL experience, but they can't put him on the 23-man roster. So I'm scouring like the minor league teams to see like what options they have. And other than like Eddie Lack and Dustin Tokarski and Michael Hutchinson, there are not many goalies out there playing in the AHL who have already gone through waivers that have NHL experience. And so even for those guys, teams are going to be asking for, a third, fourth round pick because they know that they're valuable.
Right. No, it's almost the NFL where, you lose your starting quarterback, you almost have to scrap the season. You're almost at that point for 70% of the teams in the NHL. If they lose their starting goalie, they pretty much have to scrap the season.
Now, Russ, we were exchanging messages last night, and like the Kings are up 3-1 on the Sabres.
Yeah.
And I looked this morning, and the Sabres won 4-3 in overtime. And apparently Doughty and Phaneuf both got injured in that game, which I'm sure spurred the comeback of the Sabres. But now the Sabres, the funny thing is the Sabres had won 10 games in a row. And after that road trip that they had where they lost 3, they lost another 2 after that to Toronto and Philadelphia. So they had lost 5 games in a row. So things were coming off the hinges. And now they've straightened it out a little bit with that victory. But it just shows you how bad the Kings really are right now.
Yeah, season's over for them. Like, it doesn't matter. If Quick comes back, he could certainly make it close and get them to where they're 7 points out of the playoffs, 5 points out. Everybody's 5 to 7 points out of the playoffs, right? The other day, I looked at it, and if we want to talk about the Islanders in a bigger sense, we can. But I noticed the Islanders play to get into overtime, and they have 4 or 5 points already this year in overtime. You take away those 5 points, they're out of the playoff race, right? So that's where we are as a league. So the Kings might make it close, and that by close I mean by that standard, right. But their season's over. There's no way of them to catch up in the West. It's not going to happen. They don't even have to announce that they're tanking or rebuilding because it's just going to happen naturally.
And Peter, with the Sabres, I know that Carter Hutton had some sort of minor injury. They had played Ullmark the last couple games, and I think Ullmark started yesterday, but Hutton was their backup. You can't minimize how Hutton has been a part of the resurgence of the Sabres because his numbers, he's played number one starter time. He's played like 75-80% of their starts, and his statistics are great. So really, he's the number one. Ullmark has done pretty well, and he's a young goaltender, and they're sort of spoon feeding the time to him. But Hutton's a big part of what has made the Sabres a sort of borderline playoff contender, and can't ignore that.
No, you can't at all. I think Carter Hutton's been a very welcome surprise for what's happened with Buffalo because they've tried keepers, they've tried different systems, and Buffalo's been a listing ship for a while. And there's no secret the psychological impact of just competent goaltending, what it can do to the rest of a team, is huge. And I think the Sabres are benefiting from that. I had some criticism about what Housley was doing when I watched them in person. I was blown away. They still ended up, basically making a mess of things for the Jets, but it wasn't pretty. Yet here they are hanging on and in a solid playoff position. I think as we get into another topic later on, I think they're a team who has some assets, could make an interesting push to acquire towards the trade deadline, given what they have available to use.
And Mike, I know I'm jumping the gun, but I remember when we did our previews, I'm pretty sure I picked the Blackhawks dead last. Not only are they dead last, they're spectacularly dead last. Like, they've lost like 8 in a row. They are a -34 differential. Just think about that for a minute.
And when we talked about teams that might be looking to make some deals, and I don't know who it was. It might have been Eck, where he was talking about the fact that the mindset with Chicago is to do a quick turnaround.
Yep.
Check your team. Check where you are and realize you're not turning this around real quick. I know you still have 2 great players in Taves and Kane, but it takes more than 2 players. You've got 2 ancient defensemen who are locked up for another 4 or 5 years in Seabrook and Keith. They're playing, I think, their 1,000th game together, the next game that they play. But, Duncan Keith is a shadow of his former self, and Brent Seabrook might be one of the worst contracts in the league this year. So
it's interesting because if they had a younger blue line and older forwards, they'd actually be okay. Like, you could actually survive that way. But here's what we're looking at with them, though, and what they're probably looking at. They've already got Yokoharu in the mix. He's doing okay, although defensively we know he's not quite there.
Right.
Adam Boquist is another one of those guys. He's probably going to get moved in there next year.
Right.
So that's probably giving him a little hope. And, Ian Mitchell's having a great year, but he's not ready yet. But he is another good defenseman. He's got 11 points in 14 games for Denver. So he's 2-3 years away. So they do have guys. And so the plan is we're going to just keep it rolling here because in 3 years, we think we can compete again.
So you're going to be spending $12 million on your bottom pairing with Duncan Keith and Brent Seabrook.
Yep.
Okay.
Unless they could deal them to somewhere and get them to swallow the cap, maybe Arizona will swallow more cap.
Well, I know, and I know this was mentioned on Toronto radio because Duncan Keith's name was mentioned, and the thing was, the cap hit is not the problem because the cap hit's around 5.2 or 5.3. The problem is the term. And the problem is it's one of those cap recapture deals. Yeah. So that's the problem for Chicago is if Duncan Keith goes somewhere and does a Vinny LeCavier and says, I will retire after 2 years, then all that comes back on Chicago. It's a prohibitive cap hit for them. So I don't know if they, if they make a sort of a wink, nudge deal with somebody where he gets traded back or he goes on long-term injury just to avoid the cap recapture. But that's a minefield. That's something that's.
I don't think Keith will do that. Keith, I think, is a guy that enjoys playing so much that you would have a hard time getting him to do that.
Right. Okay. A game that I turned after I finished watching the Leafs Canes, I was flipping around center ice and caught the last 10 minutes of the Blue Jackets Canucks game.
I was watching that too.
And Peter, I'll start with you because the Canucks got another goal out of Josh Levo, which is just making Toronto fans like squirm in their chairs. Oh, I told you this guy was a top 6 forward, but that's
Toronto he isn't.
There's a lot of opportunity there.
Yeah, and I'm glad for him because he's paid his dues. He's sat for most of the last 2 seasons. He's getting an opportunity. He's playing with Pettersson. Pettersson gets a goal and an assist. But the goal, and Russ, you have to talk about this too. The goal that goalie Bob let in with 1.5 minutes left to go in the third period. I hope the Philadelphia Flyers spent.
No, it was Korpisalo.
No, it was Bob.
No, Bob didn't play last time.
Are you sure? I think
it was Korpisalo.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
No, you're right.
Mike, before I knew it was Korpisalo, I thought it was Bob too.
Yeah, you're right. No, they have odd numbers. Bob is 72 and Korpisalo is 70. But that was a really bad goal.
Yeah, no question. I mean, this was a weird game. I didn't even get to see the Pettersson goals because I kept flipping around, goal and an assist. But this was a game where I enjoyed watching what Vancouver was able to do, and I was sort of cringing at what Columbus wasn't doing. Columbus was showing so much Brandon Dubinsky on the broadcast that there's a problem with your team, if Brandon Dubinsky is the focal point. Don't get me wrong, I like Brandon Dubinsky, but if he's the focal point of a game, you're not doing well in that game. And so that game, I got to tell you, and you look at Pettersson, and I hope everybody believes me now that forget about him winning the Calder. He could win bigger awards than that. He's got 32 points.
If they get close to a playoff spot, he could win the Hart. He really could.
I mean, that's a long ways away, but I'm just saying this is the quality of player he is, and him and Besser are electric. People could bitch and moan all they want about Vancouver and bitch about Tyler Mott playing or not playing, which, by the way, I like the way Tyler Mott was playing because he was getting in Dubinsky's face and he was causing problems, and he can skate and he can play defense. He could do a lot of different things. People may have hated when they signed Louis Eriksson, and people like Mike may never forgive them for that, even though they were trying to get one more little bit out of the Sedins. But what's happened in the process is Jim Benning's made a lot of good trades. And a lot of these, and I've talked about it, a lot of these, what we would call middling trades that he has filled the lineup with, has really accessorized this team nicely with their growing young talent, like Jake Virtanen had a nice goal last night. Or if he didn't get a goal, he was right in the crease there. I got to say, there's a good future for this team, and it's coming. It's not this year, but it's coming.
It is coming. You know, it's fun. It'd be nice if that was the goal for, you know, if you're a Vancouver fan, that's the kind of goal you wish that made it a 1-goal game with a minute left, not to take the lead goal, because you still kind of want to lose. You know,
based on what Aquilini said.
Yeah, exactly. You know, the other thing, Russ, that is sort of not getting noticed amidst the Pettersson hype and then also what Besser brings to things is Jake Virtanen is starting to play like the guy people thought he was going to be 4 or 5 years ago.
Virtanen, because I supported him all this time.
You've been a staunch supporter of Virtanen for years, and you know there's a lot of people who second guess that pick. You know, he had some shoulder troubles, I believe it was. He had some injuries. He just couldn't get going. Now they've got a whole shotgun Jake thing there. Whenever he scores, you know, they've got t-shirts. People are going to Mike Halford and he's retweeting them. A guy shotgunning beers. There's some joke in Vancouver now. I'd like to get someone to actually explain the history of it for me. It's hilarious, but you know, it's typical Vancouver. When things are darkest there, they find the fan base finds humor in everything and just makes it fun. And all of a sudden, the team's fun again for all the right reasons, even if they're not like a truly competitive team.
And the thing is that Virtanen is the type of player that we were talking about yesterday, where he's got the skill. He's not Tom Wilson, but he's big, he's tough, he hits. He has that aggressive game, but he's also really skilled. He has the ability to be that top 6, top 9 guy who's just impossible to handle. And if he continues on the you know, where he's going right now, he's going to be a key player for them in the next few years in terms of their team concept. So yeah, I mean that's. Let me move on to the Capitals Red Wings game. Just touch on this quickly here. Jonathan Bernier gives up 5 goals on 15 shots. Nice signing. The thing that I found funny, and we were talking about goaltending, and Jimmy Howard's name is out there in terms of a goaltender that is on the market. He is a rental. He is a UFA at the end of the year. He's playing fairly well with them in front of a team that is not very good, that's going through a reorganization. Ken Holland is putting it out there that he wants a first-round pick for Jimmy Howard. Ken, not happening. No way.
Yeah.
There will be a market for him.
Yeah.
But it's not going to be robust.
But not a number 1.
Not a first-round pick. Who's the last goalie to be traded for a first-round pick? I think was
Ryan Miller.
Ryan Miller.
There was a number 1. St. Louis sent a number 1 in that deal to Buffalo in the Ryan Miller deal.
Oh right. Oh, that's a while ago though.
Yes, yeah, but that was before Corey Schneider, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was before Corey Schneider. So Bo was basically a 9th overall pick.
Yeah. Bo Horvath for Corey Schneider. Yeah. And at the draft in New Jersey. So
yeah.
Only Lou would trade a first-round pick in his home arena.
Yeah.
Nobody else had the guts to do that.
No, that's true. I'm looking at it. Was there a first rounder in the Luongo deal?
Yeah, but that was after. Miller was what, 2012, 2013?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that was after Luongo, wasn't it? It may not have been.
Much. I mean,
I don't think so. It was
actually. Yeah,
it was Jacob Markstrom and I think a second-round pick. I don't think there was a first in there.
It is Markstrom. I'm looking to see what the pick was.
I think it was a second. Do you look it up while we just talk about a couple other games? Minnesota, skipping over the Blues beating the Panthers. Predators beat the Ottawa Senators 3-1. This one is interesting. The Minnesota Wild lay a whooping on the Montreal Canadiens, a 7-1. Now, Russ, I know you projected Minnesota for glory this year, and I'm not gonna rip on that. We'll see what happens in the playoffs.
They have a winning record. They're only a couple points out, so I'm not worried.
That's true. But the Canadians have been they're like in the wild card mix right now. But honestly, even with the return of Shea Weber, I think their shine is starting to fade a little bit. Carey Price, we're approaching the halfway mark of the season. We're at like the 30 to 35 game mark right now. And Carey Price is still not Carey Price. He's less than that. And I think they need Carey Price to be Mr. 930 save percentage for them to make the point.
I agree with that. He's got to be one of the best goalies in the league, or there's no chance for this team. I mean, that's the Weber thing coming back. I think it's always going to be an adjustment when the guy hasn't been there all year, but I think that'll settle in. But
he's been playing 20. He's been playing 25 minutes a night, and he's scored a goal. It's not him. It's the fact that it's almost like, and we've seen this before, a big player comes back and everybody relaxes.
Yeah. We got to fill in for Shea. Oh, Shea's back. Well, he's not everything.
Right.
He's not everything. And the interesting thing is you think about Toronto just went through that with Matthews. Yeah. And, they found and that's probably the difference between Mike Babcock and Claude Julien and how you adjust to these things and everything and what you do. You've got to work with those guys. But the other thing is I mean, Weber's a big player for the team, no question. But the biggest player for that team is Carey Price.
Yes.
And there will never be, I mean, Carey Price's contract should be the one contract that every GM has like on the top of their office wall, just the numbers and the timeline and the value of it. And they should look at it every day to remember never, ever, ever, ever do that again. Like no goalie should ever get strung out to a contract like that at that age, ever. You let them walk.
8 years, $84 million, 10.5 per.
Yeah.
Goodbye.
Yeah, you let them walk. What could you do with that $10.5 million a year if you had it right now instead of paying Carey Price? That's what you have to ask yourself. And if you can't come up with something better, particularly for a goalie at that age, then you shouldn't be doing you shouldn't be a GM of a team.
Yeah, actually, Mike, I can't seem to find what pick, so I'll say you're right. But I did find this in the process. Here's an interesting trade because I knew Trevor Kidd had gotten traded a couple times at the deadline.
Yeah.
Let's figure out who got the better of this trade. Carolina acquires Trevor Kidd and Gary Roberts. This is in 1997, Gary Roberts.
For Calgary.
For Calgary for Andrew Castles and J.S. Giguere.
And this was when Gary Roberts forced his way to be traded because the Calgary would not play him because they thought he was going to paralyze himself with his neck. Yeah. So I think the thing you have to factor in there is Giguere didn't become Giguere until he went to Anaheim. He didn't really do much when he was with Calgary. He never got an opportunity. So I would say that Carolina got the advantage in that deal.
Yeah, I guess that's fair to say. I'm trying to see now what they got for J.S. Giguere, which probably even less. The Ducks gave him a second-round pick, and it turned into Matt Pettinger. Ooh.
Yeah, and just like Calgary got Mika Kiprusoff from San Jose for I think a second or a third-round pick or something like that.
But here's one of Mike's favorite trades.
Oh God!
Jason Blake and Vesa Toskala go to the Anaheim Ducks for
J.S. Giguere. I love that deal. Believe me, I popped shit. I popped champagne when that deal was made because Jason Blake was a prototypical John Ferguson Jr. signing. He had an antagonistic winger in Darcy Tucker, and all he did was sign Jason Blake for, I think it was 5 years, $25 million after he scored 40 goals with the Islanders. And it was one of those salary grab deals. It was like one of those, I had my best year and then I'll go back to scoring 18 goals because that's who I really am. All right, two other
chat room. Patrick does have Leonard was traded for a first at the 2015 draft.
Alan White, you're right. You are right. That's right. I remember that. Okay, two other games quickly. One, Peter, Winnipeg beats the Chicago Blackhawks 6-3. How bad are the Blackhawks?
The Blackhawks were pretty bad.
I did see that Cam Ward save on.
Kyle Connor is going to have nightmares of Cam Ward. That was unreal. But I mean, there's just a mess. There's no jump. There's no nothing. The Jets are up 3-0 before they could blink. It was 4-0 in the second. The Blackhawks came back to me. They actually clawed back to make it 4-3. Very typical. They're meeting at the end of November. Very similar. And then the Jets just kind of put the hammer down 5-3 on a Perreault power play goal. I think the power play connected 2 or 3 times last night. Mm-hmm. And an empty netter, and it was all done. There's a little pushback. The Jets are kind of known for taking time off in games. I mean, score effects, they kind of let it, and it was Brossoit in net. He probably wants 2 back. 2 of those 4 back, not best. And he didn't get tested until 17. He didn't face a shot until the 17th minute of the game.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's bad.
The other game was, and I watched a little bit of this one, was Edmonton and Colorado. And that was, I checked in on that one because I thought the matchup was so dynamic, and it was 1-0. And it seemed to be playing into Hitchcock's hands in terms of, two dynamic teams, and he's playing, the Peterborough Freeze. It ended up being 6-4 Edmonton, but the news on this game afterward, which could have a detrimental effect on the Oilers, is that Oscar Klefbom had a hand injury that they're sending him back to Edmonton, and they say it could be weeks, not days. And he's arguably their best defenseman. And for an area on that team that is, I think, sorely lacking, if they lose Klefbom for, say, 4 or 6 weeks, I think that this little spurt that they're having, it's Koskinen.
Oh, wait, Mike, Mikko Koskinen is the best goalie in hockey right now. They'll be fine.
Oh, God. Okay.
He is.
I know. Wait. Yeah. I wholeheartedly agree there.
Wait, can you argue his numbers?
No, I'm not arguing his numbers, but he's having a good couple weeks. He's not the best goalie.
Look,
right now
they're in the Hitchcock bump, and
they are in the Hitchcock bump. But he's got a .927 save percentage, a 2.20 goals against, and I want to say he's got 3 or 4 shutouts.
Nominate him for the Vezina. Go ahead.
Look, Ken Hitchcock does not want to win games 6-4.
No,
that's not Ken Hitchcock hockey. So when he can get the 2-1, the 2-1-0, the 3-1 wins,
right,
that's great. But if that team is going to slip back into those 6-4 games and into that mode of playing, it doesn't matter what Ken Hitchcock wants. It's going to be on the 4 side of that 6-4 more often than not, unless whatever Koska, whatever his name is,
Koskinen.
It plays like the second coming of Varlamov.
And he is right now after 15 games. So far he is. Trust me, this is one of the craziest stories in hockey because
he was an Islanders draft pick, and the Islanders basically just let him go. And then
in the second round, which I thought was incredibly high for this guy. And at the time I was proven right because he didn't do anything. So then the Islanders do give him up, and he kicks around, and he goes to the KHL. But this year, the Islanders tried to get him back.
Right.
Rumor has it that they were in on him with Edmonton, and he went to Edmonton.
Wow.
Yeah, and the fallback for New York was Robin Lehner. So
right,
all right, just a couple other things here. Russ, we'll hold the World Junior talk till tomorrow because I think we can go. Pierre LeBrun wrote in the Athletic regarding the Flyers and Chuck Fletcher that they're a team that is looking to make a deal before the Christmas trade freeze. And I don't think that they're alone. I think, I believe it's the 19th. So we're talking about next week. We're talking next week Wednesday. So although if Brian Burke was a general manager, the freeze would already be in place.
Right.
Now, I think that that's true. I think there are a number of areas where Philadelphia wants to make some sort of move, but I think that there are other teams that are looking to make a move before the trade freeze, just to shake things up. I'll go first. I think St. Louis is going to do something because they're bad. They may think that their season is, I think, they're I don't know if they think their season is over with. I'm still wondering whether, the hiring of Berube is a temporary move and whether they're in on Quenneville like Philadelphia might be in on Quenneville. But I think that the dynamic with that team is, there are players in their core that they might be willing to move. And one thing from Elliot Friedman's 31 Thoughts that I thought was interesting was that the Pietrangelo talk may have been connected to William Nylander. The Leafs basically said he's 6 years older than Nylander. He's only locked up on another contract for another year. And in terms of asset value, if they're trading Nylander, they want somebody who's locked up long term. So that move, they didn't think would make sense. But Pietrangelo and Parayko and Tarasenko are out there. I think Doug Armstrong's in a posture to make moves before this trade freeze.
Honestly, look, Flyers are one, no question about it. I'll cover the Flyers, and it's still going to be really hard to pull something off. And they're 8 games behind, 8 points out with 3 games in hand. So at this point, what are you really going to spend asset-wise to possibly, if you're the Flyers, let's say, to possibly try and get in the race? If you're trading with Doug Armstrong, you're pretty much giving up a first-round pick, or you're giving up somebody like Isaac Ratcliffe or some really great prospect that, and are you really doing that for yet another goalie to sort of keep this season afloat for the fan base? Like, this is the hardest decision to make. I don't see the Flyers coming out on a good side of this if they do it.
Honestly, everybody talks about Joe Sakic being GM of the year for getting Ottawa's first-round pick in the 3-way deal, the Turris-Duchesne deal. Jason Botterill should be up there as well. He got St. Louis's first-round pick in the Ryan O'Reilly deal, and right now they're in the bottom 3 or 4 of the NHL. I don't think they're making the playoffs. The Sabres have an opportunity to get Jack Hughes, and they will have a good opportunity to get Jack Hughes with that first-round pick. And imagine Jack Hughes as your number 2 center and moving Casey Middlestat down to number 3.
Yeah.
Eichel, Hughes, Middlestat with Dahlin on defense. My God.
Yeah, that would be scary. I do want to take credit still for Ottawa not being the worst team in the league. Because I told Michael Jello they would not be the worst team.
I said 2 years ago. But
even this year, somebody said it.
Pretty bad. I don't think I said worst in the league. Maybe.
Well, they're not even close. Like they're 4th from the bottom and just in the East.
Somebody pull up the tape. By the way, after we talk about a few more of these teams, we'll take some questions in the chat to end the show. So start putting your questions in there right now. Okay, so Philadelphia, St. Louis.
I had Philadelphia and St. Louis written down. And I know when we sort of were chatting before, I said sort of before the trade deadline, or not trade deadline, but before the Christmas break. But I do think Buffalo is in a position to make a significant deal as we get down longer term to the trade deadline. They have so many assets in terms of draft picks. I think they have 4 first-round picks. Is that correct?
They have their own. They have San Jose's from the Kane deal, and they have St. Louis's. They have their own. Okay,
sorry, I don't know how I came up with that. I thought I saw something anyways. I think
somebody said they have 4 first-round picks over the next 2 years. They have They have 3 this year.
Right. So I mean, 3 this year is a huge benefit.
Yes.
And so that, they've got San Jose as their own and St. Louis. So, I think that they're going to spend, if they hang on and stay in this playoff position area, they are going to want to shore something up some way.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, and I could see them wanting to add defensive depth because they're not going to have Bogosian for the playoffs because he's going to be injured. So you've got to add something there. But
let's have
the other team I had who could potentially think of making a trade is the Wild. I think the Wild are underperforming. I don't think Boudreau's on the hot seat, but something's not clicking there.
Russ?
And
no, I mean, I think Peter's got something there because they would like to probably get out from under some of the cap problems that they have.
Yeah.
And if they could trade one of their guys, whether I don't think it's going to be on the blue line anymore, though. I think it would have to be a forward, probably.
If it is on the blue line, it would be a guy like Spurgeon who's got a year left in his contract.
Yeah, but I don't think
they're not trading Matt. They're not trading Matt Dumba.
No. But I don't even think they're going there. Like I think, honestly, I think it would have to be somebody in the starting lineup. Like I got to look at them and see who.
I know that Pierre LeBrun on the inside TSN Insiders was talking about Charlie Coyle being a possible trade chip.
Yeah, Charlie Coyle would be a good trade chip for somebody. I could see Charlie Coyle, but he's not going to – I don't know if he's going to bring exactly what they want. Like, they probably need another playmaking type there. Like, that's what I see them needing. They've got – right now they've got Parise and Stahl healthy, which I said was half the battle.
Well, they were supposedly a team that was intrigued about Nylander. So I mean, I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think that's going to happen for this season. I think that if he gets moved, it's going to be next summer, next July after the bonus. But they could be looking for. I mean, they could trade from a position of strength because I still think their defense is pretty deep. If they could find a forward who makes a difference.
Yeah, because if you look at the way they are, like Niederreiter's underperforming, maybe they would trade Niederreiter. I mean, that's
Nico Koivu was hurt, I believe.
Yeah, Koivu's hurt. So maybe Niederreiter, maybe they put him up and see what kind of action they can get on him because he's still only 25, and that may not be a bad move because if you look at them, they've got 1, 2, 3, 4 guys in double-digit goals. Zucker's 5. But as far as assist guys, Granlund's got 20, Suter's got 19, Koivu's got 17, but he's hurt. They really don't have a lot of assist guys. A lot of their assists are coming from the blue line. And so if they could get somebody like that who is a pass-first guy and trade him for Niederreiter, who has been known to score goals. He's had 24, 20, 25, 18. That might be the trade. That might be the little clicky kind of trade that could really help that team.
I'll put one team on my list, and then we'll go to some questions here. I think the Ottawa Senators might be willing to do something because in the last week they lost Duchesne, and it's a week-to-week injury. They lost Bobby Ryan again. I don't know if it's a hand injury, but it's something. But this is a team where the bottom line, where the dollars matter, and if they have an opportunity to move somebody out. Because they're in a youth movement, they're now the only thing with them is they don't want to finish low in the standings because all they're doing is helping Colorado's chances of getting Jack Hughes. But they have enough youngsters in their organization that they can move out a veteran and bring up somebody young. Like if they trade Craig Anderson, they bring up Philip Gustafson to be their goaltender. Then that's I think that's something that people
could happen.
Do. Yeah, I think that's a likely move, but we'll see. Russ, check the chat to see if we got any questions.
We do have some questions. Now, whether we have good questions, that's a whole other story. This first one from Esmir Kusevic, hopefully I pronounced that right. What do you do if you're Ray Shero in New Jersey? That's a good one, man, because we've been talking about New Jersey all year.
Well, this is the thing, and we've talked about this before. Is ownership invested there because they have like $15 million in cap space, and it's like we know that they have Taylor Hall, and we know that Taylor Hall is going to have to be paid. I think he becomes eligible next July for an extension. So they're going to pay him big money. They got Heishier, they have Will Butcher, they have some good young guys. If they think that Corey Schneider is done, they need to pay. They need to pay Keith Kincaid on a new contract because he's a UFA. So I mean, there are players they have to sign, but they're nowhere good enough right now.
Oh, I mean, right now they have to sort of look at things and say, all right, if someone's going to be dangled who has a little term on them, we could take that guy and we can give him some young assets in return. So if you're looking, you got to be looking at a guy that's got a couple years left on a deal who could help them offensively, because offensively they've got problems. And then they do have some young assets that they could, turn around and trade you. I don't know, though, off the top of my head, who's really going to help that team. But just for argument's sake, just because I brought up Niederreiter would add offense to that team. What could they offer for Nino Niederreiter? That's
Mike McLeod or something like that.
Yeah, it would probably be someone like Mike McLeod, and maybe, because there's a lot of veterans in Minnesota, they bring them up and see if McLeod could be that spark or that catalyst. That could be something. I mean, that's something plausible, but I really don't have a good plan for what New Jersey should do, because what they needed to do was, it should have been done in the offseason, and that was bring in some scoring. They didn't spend any money. They thought they had it within. They don't have it within. So
and right now they have 26 points. They're last in the East, a point behind Philadelphia. They're tied with St. Louis, LA at 24, and Chicago at 23. So they're at the bottom of the league right now. But they're not like those teams where they're weighed down with long-term contracts. Their money, they're fairly. I mean, I think they have like one or two guys that are signed like 3 years out. It's like Sami Vatanen and Damon Severson, and they have nobody else really long-term other than Schneider.
Right.
And he's a disaster right now. Okay, next question.
So next question is, and this is from Adam, what could Pominville get for a return for Buffalo? They're not going to trade him.
No.
He's not going anywhere. Matter of fact, he'll probably come back cheap next year.
Peter, this is I was talking to a reporter a couple weeks ago up in Toronto, and it was regarding Skinner and how, right now, like this was in the midst of the 10-game winning streak. And we were talking and like, wow, Skinner's just scoring like unbelievable right now. And it's like, yeah. And now the Sabres are in a quandary. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I says, they didn't trade for him to keep him. They traded for him to, be a 1-year patch to, work with Eichel. And now, he's got over 20 goals, and it puts him in a position where, if he wants $7.5, $8 million, and he works so well with Eichel, you can't, in all good conscience, just walk away from that. So, can they trade him? If they're in the playoff race, there's no way they're trading him.
No. Sometimes you have to hold on,
for
the right reasons, and considering the lack of playoff appearances the Sabres have had, and it would seem that you have to do that to prepare to let him go, knowing that you have 3 first-round picks this year and the potential of having a lottery shot at Jack Hughes. That's a risk I'm prepared to take. And the Sabres may have traded for him, but I think it's very premature to say they'd made up their minds when they traded for him that he was only a 1-year fix. I don't think you do that for a Jeff Skinner kind of talent. Jeff Skinner's pedigree says more than that. You might do that with an Evander Kane.
Yeah.
You don't do it with a Jeff Skinner.
Let's just say this, because I remember the talk after the trade and the talk during the preseason.
Yeah.
The hope was Skinner would be successful, but the fact he's from the Toronto area, and the fact that Buffalo was close and his family would be close, that they, if he liked the situation in Buffalo, that they could get him locked up long-term on something fairly reasonable. That's out the window because he's hitting the home run right now. And if you're talking $7.5 million, you're probably not doing that because they already have a Pozo signed up. They're going to have to pay Dahlin and Middlestat and maybe Sam Reinhart and a couple other of their young guys down the road. So I don't think they want to lock themselves up on somebody who's an old 26. I mean, he's 26 years old, but he's been in the league since he was 18. He's had concussion problems. I mean, he's having a great year, but you're going to be paying him on that great year, and it might be something you really don't want to pay that much for. So, I mean,
here's another one. Toronto Greenhouse, and we know he's always smoking. First is too high for Howard, but maybe a second or a decent prospect from a team that really needs him. All right, so let's say, for argument's sake, Jimmy Howard's dangled out there to the Flyers. Okay, the Flyers, and let's say they ask for Robert Hagg and a pick. Okay. I think you could see a trade where it's Jimmy Howard and like a sixth for Robert Hagg and like a fourth. I think you could see that because I think Philly then would call up Philip Myers, who's got 15 points in 27 games. He's a +7, and roll the dice on that and try and solidify their goaltending position. And Howard's got a year left, right?
Right. No, he's a UFA at this year.
UFA, but they could still try and – he might be one goalie that they might be able to get on a 2-year. But even if they get him on a 3-year, you just got to – if he does well, then you just got to bite the bullet on that. You do.
Yeah, I think a guy like Craig Anderson's a better fit because he's got another year.
But Anderson, they'll want a first. There's no question in my mind they will.
Right, and Philadelphia's not giving up a first-round pick because they're in the lottery right now.
Right, but I'm just saying for Anderson, Peter, don't you agree that for Anderson they're going to want more than what Detroit will want for Jimmy Howard?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
especially because of that year. Yeah. Especially because of that year left.
Yeah. The year on the salary means a lot, but for Philly, if they want to sort of keep this thing afloat, they could trade Jimmy Howard and they could trade one of their younger defensemen where Haig is somebody that would hurt a little bit. But again, if you go look at most of those drafts or mocks for Seattle when they come in, what the expansion draft will look like for them, Robert Hagg is one of those guys that ends up going to Seattle anyhow.
Yeah, I'm just looking up as we speak here the UFA goaltenders and you got to remember these are going to be the guys that teams will be looking at in terms of rentals. And one second here, this is good podcasting here. Okay, Bobrovsky is going to be on the market. Varlamov, Mike Smith, Jimmy Howard, Cam Talbot, and then it goes way down. It goes Ward, Brian Elliott, Neuwirth, Anders Nielsen, Koskinen might be, a little higher. Robin Leonard. I mean, there's 7, 8 goaltenders, and that list. I mean, Bobrovsky's number one, Varlamov's the number one. I don't think any of the other ones are no doubt number ones.
Right. Well, here's the thing. So, if you're looking at it from Fletcher's standpoint, are you going to give Bobrovsky $10 million a year for 5 years because that's what it'll take? Or $9 million a year for 5 years? No, probably not, right? So
it's asinine where they are. Okay,
I know, but it's not impossible. It's not.
No, it's not impossible at all. They have cap room.
But I'm just saying it's probably not their number one choice. But let's just put that on the back burner. So you look at Bob and you say, all right, let's put Bob on the back burner. So now we're looking at Varlamov. He's going to want $7 or $8 million, probably $7 million a year, and he's not taking anything less than 3 years. There's no way.
I could see 6.5 for 3 years, something like that. Yeah.
So,
especially coming off a good year with Colorado.
So, are you doing that? If you don't do that, then the fall off in this goalie market is great, right? Because those are the two really true number ones, and then everything else is falling off a different measure of a cliff. Cam Talbot might be next. So, this is where I'm saying you could see where Jimmy Howard fits in this year, and then how do you know? He might be a good fit for them temporarily, and then maybe there's something you could do because otherwise you could be making a $6 to $9 million mistake bringing in one of those other guys on more term.
Well, there's more cost certainty if you trade for a Craig Anderson, and if you don't give up a first-round pick this year.
They want a first.
Right. But say that they don't. If the Flyers give them somebody they drafted in the first round, like a
Morgan Frost. Frost for Craig Anderson.
Yeah, that's not happening. But okay,
but I'm just saying. But that's what they'll ask.
I see where you're coming from, and I know that Ottawa wants to so badly to get back in the first round because they screwed up and gave up their first round pick in the other deal. So I get that, and that's the same mentality with St. Louis here. That's why I think St. Louis, if there are deals out there, if truly Parayko, Pietrangelo, other players are being shopped, and if they make a deal before the deadline, the prerequisite is going to be we get a first round pick back in that deal. Any more questions?
Let's see. Can Buffalo trade to Seattle for future considerations? Not yet.
No, there's not even a GM in place, so that's not happening.
Yeah.
That can't happen. All right, so here's Too Dope is saying Ty Smith for Palat or Killorn. That is suicide. You are going to trade a guy who could be a 2 or a 4 in the NHL in a couple of years because he's on an accelerated pace now for a guy that is a 15 to 18 goal scorer, 20 goals.
And I question whether it goes back to whether Josh Harris wants to spend money. Why would he trade a one of their better prospects for a guy like Palat or Killorn who are making either $4 or close to $5 million, or Tyler Johnson? Why would they do that? He only does that if he wants to invest more money in that organization, and we're skeptical of whether he wants to right now. So I mean, I could see one of those guys going to Arizona or something like that because they always need caps. They always need somebody to get to the cap floor.
Yeah. So BK Ups is asking, is Thomas Chabot going to win the Norris or Riley? If the season ended today, those are probably the top 2 vote getters.
I don't think Chabot right now, unless Chabot keeps this ridiculous pace.
Which he could.
He could very well. But the thing is, technically he's not a rookie. I think he is a
rookie.
Okay, so you know how it works when it comes to like awards like the Norris. You have to sort of work your way up into.
No, he's not technically a rookie. He played 63 games.
Right. Okay. So he's a second-year guy. So I think he'd be in the mix, but I think he'd end up, even if he continues to have this kind of year, to be like 4th or 5th. I think it's going to be. Well, it's okay. Doughty's not going to be in the mix because the Kings are so bad. Weber's been hurt. Carlson's having a subpar year. It'll be Brent Burns. It'll be Subban or Yossi. It'll be John Carlson, Riley. I mean, there's I think it'll be guys who have proven more and been more consistent than
Chabot gets 65, 70 points.
Right.
Morgan Riley will have to have close to that to win it. Otherwise, Chabot is going to be right up there. I mean, it's a possibility.
Riley's scoring more than a point per game. So I don't think that's going to continue, but stranger things have happened. So, all right, we'll end it there. We'll be back tomorrow with another edition of the Hockey Buzzcast. For Peter Tessier, for Russ Cohen, I'm Michael Agello. Thank you for watching. And remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey.